Coming up on the Dog Podcast.
The dogs are the easy part. Like I get asked all the time, Sarah, what is the hardest breed to train? And the answer is always, well, that's why I don't call myself a dog trainer.
It's what level of experience qualification should a professional have in order to call themselves a canine behaviour specialist?
Yeah.
And therefore, what should dog owners be looking for when they're approaching someone? Tell me a little bit about what force-free is. There's so many people who are perhaps anti-force-free because there are some misconceptions. Do you use the word no as a force-free professional? Hi everyone, welcome back to the Dog Podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte Bryan. My guest today is Sarah Russin. She's a canine behaviour specialist and author of The Canine Perspective. Our sponsor for today's episode is Small Business Toolbox.
As an Australian small business owner, you know that growing online isn't always easy. That's where Small Biz Toolbox comes in. We offer all the tools and resources you need to grow your business online. With Small Biz Toolbox, you'll gain access to valuable resources like guides, ebooks, courses, and powerful AI tools designed to help you succeed. Our resources cover essential topics like SEO, online marketing, and content development, unlocking the full potential of your business in the online space. We offer 3 plans tailored to your needs: basic, premium, and ultimate. Whether you're just starting or ready to take it to the next level, there's a plan to suit you. Some of our resources are even free to try. With Small Biz Toolbox, small businesses can grow big online. Visit smallbiztoolbox.com.au now to explore our plans and start growing your business today.
So Sarah, it's so exciting having written a book, Canine Perspective.
Thank you.
I've read it and it is a great read. And I think I peeled through it really quick. It was so good. I was just enthralled with it.
Oh, thank you.
So why did you write the book?
Well, the book was designed for, and I hate to say the word average, but average dog owners, guardians. So it wasn't designed for people in the industry like us. It wasn't designed for vets or vet nurses, although they are more than welcome to read it. It was designed for people who are guardians to dogs. And, you know, in the 20 years that I've been a canine behaviour specialist, I have been asked a whole bunch of questions, often similar kinds of questions, often the same kind of questions. And I just sort of thought, you know what, why not put it into a book? I mean, I was a bit of a book nerd when I was a kid, bit of a bookworm. So I've always loved books. I've always loved reading, and writing a book was something that I always wanted to do. And I just decided, why not? It's time to do it. It's time to do it. So
I love that. And kudos to you, because book writing takes ages, and it's lots of editing and a lot of self-motivation.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for going out and having done it. So.
Yeah, well, I actually did it in 6 months, which was really
amazing.
Fast. And it actually went number 1 on the Amazon bestseller list in 11 categories in Australia in
number
48 hours.
On 11 categories.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It is an amazing book. So I can't wait to start having a bit of a chat about it today.
Thank you.
I love the when we read in the book, it's you mentioned a few times helping dogs with their people problems.
Yeah.
And I really, really love that.
Yeah.
In fact, you had a quote for every chapter.
I did.
Some sort of quote. And I think my favorite was on chapter 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, properly trained, man can become a dog's best friend.
Yeah.
Or person in this day and age.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I love that. And that's been my favorite quote since I read it. I've been mentioning it to any client dog professional I see, because it's so true. It's our jobs have very little to do with training the dogs.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if people don't do stuff at home and if people don't be consistent, the dog's not going to improve.
Yeah. Well, that's why I don't call myself a dog trainer. So that's why I call myself a canine behaviour specialist. So, you know, because I'm training the humans about their dog's behaviour, the dogs are the easy part. Like I get asked all the time, what is the hardest breed to train? And the answer is always human. Always. Always. So yeah, I did quote my partner quite a bit about, he got very excited when he was mentioned in the book, but also when he came up with the whole, and he didn't come up with it, he stole it from a movie, and it was about horses. So, but I was like, that's all right, we'll chuck it in. And he was a bit chuffed when he got mentioned. But yeah, I mean, it's the truth. It's the truth, right? So the more education that we can have as humans, the better our relationship with our dogs, the better the bond with the dog. And that, to me, that's what it's all about.
It's amazing. That relationship is really important. We want more of a companion, less a pet in that sense. I think when we do our training, I think a lot of people want, and you mentioned this in the book actually, and we'll come back to it later, but you mention a lot about robotic dogs and how humans expect their dogs to not actually be dogs, to be like little well-trained people sort of thing, and dogs are dogs. So it's definitely something I'd like to dive into. But you did mention, so you're a canine behaviour specialist.
Yep.
What would you say are because dog training is such an unregulated industry, dogs in general is very unregulated.
Absolutely.
What do you think a professional should have? What sort of experience, what level of experience, qualification should a professional have in order to call themselves a canine behaviour specialist?
Yep.
And therefore, what should dog owners be looking for when they're approaching someone?
It's a really good question, and it's so hard because the industry is unregulated. So I had somebody, this was many, many years ago, who came to my classes with their dog and did some training with me and then read a book and then did up business cards and called himself a dog trainer.
Really?
And I'm just like, that's really not great for the profession. It's not great for the profession, but it's also not great for people then going to him for a service where we're looking at dogs, it sounds awful and dramatic, but there's a lot of damage that can be done by dogs, right?
Absolutely.
Dogs can maim, dogs can kill. That's the reality of it. And so I think professionals need to have a certain standard, a certain level. And I think, and this is a difficulty with an unregulated industry, is that even the qualifications that people get are not regulated.
No.
And so that makes things really difficult. It's hard for guardians. It's hard for professionals. It's just very, very difficult. So I think I definitely believe that qualifications are important. I believe that personally. But what's even more important, I think, is ongoing education.
Exactly.
So I think making sure that professionals are going to seminars regularly, are updating their knowledge. There's no point, you wouldn't go, and industry is different, but you wouldn't go to your doctor or you wouldn't go to a healthcare professional who hadn't updated their knowledge in at least 12 months.
You're exactly right.
You just wouldn't. And so you wouldn't go to a vet who hasn't updated their knowledge, who isn't going to seminars. Now, in their industry, they have to, but I just think there is so much research that is coming out all the time about dogs and dog behaviour and training. And if your professional is not going to update their knowledge, then I'd be looking for a new professional, to be honest with you. And the answer to this is to have the industry regulated. I don't know whether that's going to happen anytime soon. And nowhere in the world, I don't believe, is the industry regulated. So it's a global, worldwide thing that needs to happen.
It is.
The more that dog training professionals push for it, hopefully the more that will happen. But it's hard. It's really hard. Look, I'm a member of a couple of professional associations, and they do have requirements with regards to continuing education. So, I've made that a priority for myself, and not every trainer does that.
In your book, you're very adamant about being the force-free.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what force-free is, because I do believe there's so many people who are perhaps anti-force-free, and because there are some misconceptions, a couple off the top of my head are dogs are always use food. And a lot of people are saying you always use food. We're bribing our dogs where you can't say no to them. You have no boundaries. You just, and I think the term you used was positive. The belief of many is that positive is the same as permissive. Yeah. And just allowing everything. And that's definitely not the case from what I've read.
No.
So what is force-free, just to debunk some of those?
Okay. So force-free is, to me, force-free is all about using techniques that don't involve pain or force or fear. So it's a way of training. So that doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. That doesn't mean that you don't have things that you do and don't want the dog to do or will and won't allow. But it's about the way that we go about it. So I guess the best example to put it into human terms would be positive parenting, right? So it's more about looking at the behavior that you want and really reinforcing that, And so, we're communicating interspecies, right? So we have enough trouble communicating with our own species, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Anybody that lives with a member of the opposite sex knows that it is hard enough to communicate with our own species, and a lot gets lost in translation.
And we speak the same language.
And we speak the same language, right? So when we're talking to our dog, we are communicating interspecies. And as soon as you use force or fear, you shut down the learning process. As soon as that nervous system kicks in, as soon as there is nervous system engagement, which is what happens when there's fear or when there's stress, you actually shut down learning. It's hard enough to communicate with our own species, let alone with another one, let alone throwing in a nervous system activation. So force-free training, it's not permissive. What it does is it allows the nervous system to remain calm so that learning can take place. And when people say, yes, but it's all about food, yes, we use food a lot because it's easy.
Easy.
It's, dogs eat. So do we. It's very, very easy. And so a lot of dogs are motivated by food. It's a primary resource. So yes, we use a lot of food, but I've worked with some dogs who aren't interested in food. So for whatever reason. And so we either need to find something more valuable, whether it's a more valuable food, or we look for things like their favorite toy or their favorite game or their favorite thing to do. I once had, and I mentioned this in the book, I once had a client whose dog, all he wanted to do was sniff and pee on stuff. He wasn't interested in pats. He wasn't interested in food. He wasn't interested in toys. He couldn't give a rat's about anything with regards to that. So we used the opportunity to sniff and pee on stuff as his reinforcer.
As the reward.
And so we were able to get him to do a whole pile of stuff simply by saying, okay, we'd like you to pay attention and can you sit? And he did. And we'd like, okay, off you go pee. And he'd go, great. So it's not about always using food. It's not about letting it be a free-for-all because that's anarchy, right? So
Exactly.
That's not what this is about. It's about the way in which you teach. It's about the way in which you educate. It's about the way in which you communicate with another species. And to make it as easy as possible for them to understand us and us to understand them.
So would you say force-free is more of toward the training rather than the whole?
Look, I think it's a bit of a philosophy and way of life. And when we look at exotic animal training, and don't get me started on animals in captivity, that's a whole other subject.
Whole different thing.
That's a whole other thing. Not
We'll
a fan.
do another video on that.
Not a fan. But when we look at exotic animal trainers, they use force-free.
They do.
Right? They use force-free training. So seals, dolphins, in zoos for husbandry, it's all force-free. And we're completely accepting of that. But then when it comes to dogs, for some reason we as humans have this block. Oh no, we shouldn't train them like that. We shouldn't treat them like that. We shouldn't treat them well. We shouldn't be kind to them. We shouldn't show them love and affection. We should do that on our terms. There is this block that we seem to have, which I personally don't understand. And I have clients who come to me and they say, oh, I know I spoil him, or I know I shouldn't do this, and I know I shouldn't do that. And I think to myself, there are ways and means of being able to absolutely love and adore your dog and yet still have them very well behaved.
You did say that a lot of people assume that they shouldn't treat dogs with love and kindness. I think perhaps people do, but they just don't understand perhaps that you don't have to just keep giving things. So dogs can still have structure. You can still respect dogs and not necessarily give them rewards for every little thing. And I think that's where a lot of people may perhaps have reservations towards the force-free because they assume it's just allowing the dog to do anything. There's no structure, anything at all.
I think that there is this or mentality, right? You have structure or you are kind to or you spoil your dog, right? I think there's this or, and it's actually an and.
Exactly.
Right? You can have structure and
you can
love up your dog.
Absolutely.
You can have boundaries and spoil them rotten. You can have, it's an and. I think it's important though to have boundaries and to have structure. You don't have to have, it doesn't have to be militant. It doesn't have to be robotic. It doesn't have to be, like I said, I get people that say to me, I know that I shouldn't let my dog on the couch.
I do.
I do.
My dog sleeps on the bed. Frankie, he sleeps on the bed. He gets up on the couch when I ask him to. When we go out for a walk, he's the first one out the door. There's no weight there. So you don't have to. But equally, he's a good boy, and he listens to me when I need him to do something. But he does get a lot of free rein, which is great.
Yeah, and so do mine. You know, my three
You got
pugs,
3 pugs.
who are on the cover, they get to sleep on the bed with us, and they're on the couch with us, and they have a lot of free rein as well. Are they well behaved? Yes. You know, Callie, in her heyday, she's nearly 13. She'll be 13
Which
next
one's
month.
Callie?
Callie's the one lying down.
Callie's the one lying down.
So Callie was a certified assistance dog when in her heyday, and
beautiful.
you know, has been down to Melbourne on the plane in the cabin with me. And I talk about her in the last chapter about old dogs. And you know, we were walking around the Melbourne airport, and I had her crate, my suitcase, and her tethered around my waist, and she just followed me, you know, in and out of people zooming around Melbourne airport, and stopped when I stopped, and was so beautiful, ignored everything, was beautifully better behaved than the sniffer dog, I have to say, who was desperately trying to get to her. And she looked at me and went,
no,
not sure what's going on there, Mum. But, you know, I think that it is possible to have a well-behaved dog and have structure and boundaries.
I guess the big question that a lot of people would have is, do you use the word no as a force-free professional?
Personally, no, I don't.
What do you use instead?
So for me, the word no is an interruptive sound, right? Yeah. It has meaning and connotation for us. No means don't do that, get out of that, stop that, that's naughty, that's bad, don't do that again, right? That's what no means to us.
Yeah.
To the dog, it's an interruptive sound. It doesn't actually have meaning. Look, do I say it to my dogs from time to time? Yes, I say it from knowing full well they don't know what it means.
Exactly.
So I use leave it a lot because I've taught them leave it. I've conditioned. Leave it to me means stop what you're doing and look at me.
Perfect.
Right? It doesn't matter what you're doing. You don't have to worry about what it is that you're doing. Are you barking and I want you to stop? Leave it.
Exactly.
Are you rolling in something? Leave it. Are you licking your brother's ear? Leave it. Are you about to eat something gross? Leave it.
Leave it.
So I use leave it a lot and very effectively. So that's my alternative to a no. I just find that no can be, it just has it's so much more meaning for us humans that I don't necessarily think, it just interrupts, right? It's an interruptive sound.
Is that a bad thing though? If it's just an interruptive sound, is that a bad thing to
I don't think
people don't want to teach or don't have a proper leave it?
I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think what people don't realize is when you interrupt a behavior, you need to then give them something else to do. Right?
Do.
So leave it means stop what you're doing and look at me.
Excellent.
Right? It's an alternative behavior. I want you to stop. I want you to look. So then I can give you the next instruction or I can then let you know what I'd like you to do instead. No simply interrupts the behavior, but there's nothing else.
There's no follow on.
Nothing comes after that. And I think that's the issue, right? There's this assumption that then the dog understands and knows that that was naughty and knows that that was bad. And remember, it's not good and bad behavior. It's desirable and undesirable.
Exactly.
So I think what happens is that there's this no, the dog stops. People go, see, they understood when they really haven't.
Yeah.
And then there's this loss, gets lost in translation. Then they get frustrated when the dog does it again because the dog hasn't learned. And so I think it's not necessarily the word. I think it's the meaning that's attached to the word. And I think the fact that what it then brings to the table gets very confusing.
And then it's the forgetting that you haven't given your dog an alternative.
You haven't given them the next cue. You haven't given them the next alternative. You haven't. So I think it's more complex than just is no a bad thing if you're a force-free trainer. Personally, I have an issue with the word simply because it is not in keeping with force-free philosophy.
No.
So that's a personal thing. That's me personally. I'm sure that other force-free trainers don't feel that way, but that's me personally. Force-free training is all about really shifting your focus into focusing on when the dog does something right. So I do a lot of work with reactive dogs. And one of the things that I try and encourage people to do is, and obviously we work at a distance and we're doing desensitization work in small increments, and there's, it's quite a detailed process, but just to simplify things for the purpose of this discussion. When the dog does nothing, reward that.
Exactly.
Because what you want is for them to do nothing. You want them to watch the trigger go past at a distance and do nothing. You don't want to set them up. And again, this is force-free training. You don't want to set them up and then they react and then you give that a correction. You want them to do nothing. So you have to reward that. Otherwise, how do they know?
You're exactly
How do
right.
they know that that's what you want?
That's a really great point, because so many people, like I used to run puppy classes and dog obedience classes, all this sort of stuff. I know issue with the word dog obedience, but just for the general, so everyone else knows what they are. But the group classes, and you see that, and I'm there and I'm talking to people and explaining, and I can see the dog sitting well, and I keep going, everyone reward your dogs, because they're all doing well. Or I'm talking to someone, their dog's doing just chilling out, and I'm like, keep rewarding. And a lot of people, I think, either forget or they don't see the point in rewarding. You're bang on when you said people wait for their dog to fail, just so they can then correct them. And they think that's the only way the dog's going to learn.
And I think that's possibly where the whole all you're doing is feeding, all you're doing is pushing treats in.
Exactly.
At that point, you're reinforcing a duration sit.
Exactly.
You're rewarding the dog for sitting there calmly for a period of time and not actually having moved, having said hello to another dog, having sniffed anything, having, you're actually rewarding the fact that's really hard to sit there for a period of time. Well done. It is a really, force-free training is a totally different mindset.
Exactly.
It's really about being very aware of what it is you do want. I want you to sit there and do nothing. Well, the dog needs to be paid for that.
Exactly.
And I talk to people a lot when people say to me, I don't want to use food, or I don't want to, reward desirable behavior. And I say to people, I want to go to work and get paid. Do you want to go to work and get paid? And we get this question a lot with regards to when can I start fading the food out? When can I stop rewarding? And I go, well, you go to work, and do you get paid weekly for working? Or does your boss go, you know what, you know your job now, I'm going to stop paying you?
Exactly.
I think we need to still reinforce in some way, shape or form. And there's the whole intermittent reinforcements, we can get into technicalities and jargon, which I don't want to. But I think it's really important. If the dog does a good job, you need to pay them.
Exactly.
In some way that they find rewarding. They find rewarding.
Not often. Often we will do something and the dog may not find that as valuable as something else.
Yeah.
And a great thing to do is the treat test, where if you want to see what your dog likes, get 6 bowls out, put a different treat in each one and make sure there's no cross-contamination, and allow your dog into the room, see which they go to first.
Yeah.
Because they'll sniff each bowl and they'll go to the one they prefer.
Yeah.
Take them out, rearrange the bowls, do the same thing. If they keep going to the same treat, that's your high value reward.
Exactly. Or if you have pugs, they'll just hoover them all.
They'll just eat everything.
Anything. I'll eat anything.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It's I guess the question would be just the fading out of the treats. Now, you and I, to be honest, I'm one of those people who I don't necessarily want to reward my dog all the time.
Yep.
Right? Certainly in the learning stage, reward all the time. And now occasionally I'll go out, I'll take some treats, yes, and I'll go, yeah, we did so good. We'll go out for a specific training session, I'll take food, no sweat.
Yeah.
But I do, and I'm sure a lot of people are the same. You do get to a point though where it's, I don't really want to have a bag full of smelly treats. We want to make sure that is valuable to the dog first.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that the dog's motivated to do the behavior, because it's not just the treat. When we give the reward, of course, it releases dopamine and oxytocin and all these feel-good things.
Yep.
After a period of time, the dog starts to see that action as being rewarding in itself.
Yep.
And it does start to become almost self-rewarding to the dog.
Yep.
So do you think there is a point where you can just stop rewarding all the time?
I think there is. I think this brings up a number of things. So yes, I think that you can get to the point where the activity in itself becomes rewarding. You can, there is a phenomena whereby you can chain behaviors together and the next behavior actually rewards the previous one, which is called either forward or backward chaining.
Forward or backwards, yeah.
And then there is the rewarding intermittently or rewarding with something different. So if you have a dog who gets reinforced by a variety of different things, you don't always have to use food. Then you can mix up your reinforcement. So you're still rewarding them with great stuff like, the pugs, yes, they love food. They also love a butt scratch. In the event I don't have any food on me, they get the best butt scratch ever. So I think that, and also sometimes when I take my dogs out and I'm taking treats with me, we're working on different things. So yes, they're still getting reinforcement, but today we might be working on recalls, and it might be that you already know how to come away from sand, because that's not really reinforcing. But the dead fish that was on the beach that you came away from, yeah, I'm going to pay that
I'm going
one.
to reward that one.
So as you start to get better and better and better at things, you start to make what they earn the reinforcement for more difficult.
Exactly.
And if I can use a human analogy, right, if I can use going to the gym.
Yeah.
When I first started going to the gym, I used to put $5, every time I went, I'd put $5 in a little Ziploc bag. And at the end of the month, whatever I had raised in the month,
self-raised,
I went and splurged, whether it was on new gym gear or a massage or had my nails done or something.
Fantastic.
That's what I did, right? Now going to the gym itself is rewarding.
It is.
It's still hard because as I get better at it, I'm upping the ante in the weights or in my capacity for cardio or what. So it's still difficult, but the actual activity itself is more enjoyable.
Exactly.
So I still occasionally do reward myself for a good session at the gym.
Excellent.
So and it just helps to maintain the joy in the activity and the learning. And, and again, this is all force-free principles.
Exactly.
It's all about force-free training. The same goes if you start to use punishment in your training, if you start to include aversives, what happens is that there's a negative association to learning.
Yeah.
There's a negative association to that activity. There's potentially a negative association to you as the trainer. So, it can go both ways. And this is why I love force-free training, because it still keeps everything. I mean, it sounds like unicorns and rainbows. It's not, because it's hard.
Exactly.
But it's because it does require you to think outside the box. You have to think outside the square sometimes.
Going the force-free way, it will take a little bit longer. Do you think?
It can do. Because sometimes if you're using punishment, you can either shut the dog down, which means you shut down learning.
Mm-hmm.
You kick in the nervous system, you shut down learning. So in some respects, that can actually take longer then.
Can take longer.
But also, if the dog then starts to get confused, it's now taking longer.
Exactly.
Sometimes by using, either way, but sometimes with punishment, they don't always get the gist of what it is that you're punishing.
Exactly.
And so then there's confusion and then it takes longer. So I think that any form of communication and teaching will depend on the individual dog. It will depend on, there's so many factors. And so by using force-free training, we're just making it easier.
Exactly.
And not engaging that nervous system shutdown. That's really the key. Right? Because if I'm trying to teach you something and you're already feeling stressed because you're not getting it and you don't quite understand,
applying more pressure
is not going to help.
Exactly.
All it will do is shut you down.
Yeah.
Right? And make you more frustrated and hate me. So I don't want that. So it's that whole philosophy in we want to keep those learning pathways happening. We want to keep the dog trying to work out exactly what it is that we're after. And I believe that force-free training does that.
And I loved in your book, you actually had a really cool analogy about the teacher with the classroom.
Yeah.
So I thought for the people who haven't read the book,
yeah,
could you go through that analogy? Because it ties exactly into what you were just saying.
So the people who haven't read the book yet.
Yeah. Yes. Buy the book. It's available on Amazon and anywhere else.
It's also available on my website.
And on Sarah's website. That'll be listed at the end.
So I talked a little bit about the classroom,
yeah.
And what I talked about was, I'm a bit older than you. So when I was going to school, they had just phased the cane out.
Yeah.
So it was quite some time ago that I was a young person at school. But the idea behind the example that I gave in the book was to look at the difference between aversive training or aversive teaching and using aversives in teaching and using a more force-free, positive approach. So what I talked about was back in the day, and for those of people in my vintage that are watching this, they will remember that the way that things were taught back then, there was a lot of ridicule.
Yeah.
So the teacher would stand up at the front of the classroom and ask a question. Someone might raise their hand. Most kids and most students avoided eye contact.
Yeah.
Right? There was lots of avoiding eye contact. There was lots of keeping busy with something else. And the teacher would pick on somebody to answer the question. When they got the question wrong, they were either ridiculed or they were sent to the principal or they were given detention or they were made fun of in front of the rest of the class, made to feel stupid in front of the rest of the class.
And no one likes feeling stupid.
No one likes feeling stupid. No one likes feeling frustrated. No one likes feeling afraid.
Like they're inadequate or they can't do it.
No, nobody likes feeling like that.
Okay.
And so what that would do is it would shut everybody down. And the questions that I asked was, as you're reading this, how does your nervous system feel? Do you feel like it's bringing flashbacks back? But do you feel like you would want to participate in that classroom? Do you think that learning was actually taking place? Or was everybody just trying to be avoidant? And the classroom was probably quiet, and the classroom was probably full of very well-behaved students.
And if someone looked in, they'd probably see everyone down at their desk, head down, working hard.
Yeah, and very in control and very well-behaved but in actual fact, there's lots of shutdown going on.
Okay.
And then another example that I used was, okay, let's imagine the same classroom and the teacher asks a question and someone raises their hand and it's the wrong answer.
Yeah.
And the teacher says, okay, that's not the answer that I'm looking for, but I really love the way that you think. Nice try. Let's go to someone else. And someone else raises their hand and they get the answer right and they receive a prize.
Yeah.
Right? What we've got taking place is learning. Right? And so when we're looking at different styles of training, we need to ask ourselves, firstly, is learning taking place?
Yeah.
But more importantly than that, is this for the benefit of the dog?
Or is it for our benefit?
Correct. Or is this, does this benefit the dog's mental, physical, and emotional well-being? The techniques that I'm using, does it benefit their mental, physical, and emotional well-being in the way that I'm approaching teaching this? Because if it's shutting them down, if it's hurting them and causing them physical pain or discomfort, or it's damaging the bond and the relationship and their confidence, then it's not good for the dog. And when we're educating our dogs, we as guardians need to take this into consideration. We have a responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
We do. With great power comes great responsibility. Thanks, Spider-Man. But I really think that, we do. We have as guardians, we do have a responsibility. As parents, we have a responsibility to our children. As guardians, we have a responsibility to our dogs.
Exactly.
It's just, I believe we do.
People assume that force-free is never saying no, just rewarding absolutely everything all the time.
Then you just hand out treats willy-nilly.
Exactly. It's not the case. So.
No, that's not training at all.
Exactly.
Like, you're actually not teaching anything.
In fact, you're confusing. If you reward absolutely everything, then your dog goes, well, I get a treat. For a recall, for instance, I get a treat if you say here and I come over to you as fast as possible and I run over to you and I sit really quickly and I'm giving you focus and I get a treat. But then you call me a second time and I'm a bit lazy or I have a sniff or I get distracted and I come over in my own sweet time and I get another treat. Your dog starts to go, well, I'll go the easier part, and it does start to become a bit confusing as well.
Or to build on that, they either come running to you and they get a treat, or they don't come at all and you walk over to them and give them a treat.
Exactly.
That's kind of confusing.
It is confusing.
So it's not just about going, oh, here's a treat, kind of willy-nilly, just
rewarding everything.
Yeah. So it's about going, okay, I'm going to teach you something. This is my plan for teaching you. This is what I want to teach you. And now I'm going to reward the stuff that I like. I mean, to give you another example, I worked with somebody the other day who, beautiful French Bulldog, was my first experience of listening to the French Bulldog scream, that he did whenever visitors came over. And to the point where we couldn't have a conversation. Like, it was quite intense.
Yeah.
And his guardian had called me because really needed some help. They wanted to have visitors over and there was nowhere that they could. They'd had another trainer come in who had suggested walking through a doorway first, or locking him outside, or correcting him every time that he made that sound. And they had tried all of those things and none of it had worked. And so I sort of said to them, why don't we try reinforcing him when he's quiet? And they kind of looked at me and went, okay. So we got a moment of quiet and we rewarded that. And then we got another moment and we rewarded that. And at the beginning, it was pretty rapid fire. And then we started to extend the amount of time between treats, and then extend it further and extend it further. And we were able to have a half-hour conversation. And by that stage, he was up to a couple of minutes in between treats. And that was in our first session.
That's in a first session.
So we were educating him, what we want from you is a duration quiet.
Exactly.
And we had to start with rapid fire and then gradually, slowly build that up so that he went, oh, you want me to keep being quiet?
Keep being quiet.
I understand you now. And no amount of putting it on cue, because that was just paying attention to the behavior. So it's, force free is also about knowing what to do and how to do it and when to do it, as much as, just it's not about rewarding willy-nilly about anything. Otherwise, you can potentially reward behavior you don't want.
Exactly. Now, someone who's listening to this and just heard you talk about getting dogs to be quiet at the door, right?
Yeah.
You'd want to be waiting a couple of seconds after they stop barking to make sure they're thinking, that they're aware that they're quiet.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, they go, the dog's barking or going off, and then the dog's quiet for half a second, then they reward. But the problem is the dog's still in the barking mode.
Yeah.
And so the dog goes, oh, I've been rewarded for barking, let's keep going. So I think people just want to wait a little bit longer, and even just 3 to 5 seconds. Maybe you might not get to 5 seconds. That might be too long because the dog may start again, but even kind of 3 seconds just to make sure the dog's taking a breath and is aware that they're quieter before we start reinforcing that.
Yeah. I mean, dogs are clever enough to chain behaviors together.
They are. Very clever.
You see this with jumping up all the time.
You do.
Jump up, sit, I'm waiting for my treat. And we have to teach them.
And the dog thinks that the jump up is
part of the behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have to teach them that actually, no, the jumping up isn't part of it. It's just about sticking your butt on the ground. Exactly. So there is an art to it. There is a science to it. It can sometimes be complicated with some, and that's where force-free training professionals can help.
Exactly.
Now, I do have to say that life is full of aversives, right? Life is full of aversives, and I do get people that say, yes, but the mother dog will correct the puppy, and so aversives are a part of life. True, but a mother dog corrects the puppy in a dog way.
And she's a dog.
And she's a dog.
And the puppy's aware that she's a dog.
And the puppy is aware. And
We're
so,
not dogs.
Dogs communicate with other dogs in a totally different way to how a human communicates with a dog. Men communicate with other men in a totally different way to the way that
Yeah, exactly right.
People from different cultures will communicate in different ways. So dogs will communicate in a way that they understand that we cannot duplicate. Exactly. We can't duplicate the body language cues. We can't communicate the smell changes that they emit.
I was going to say, smell.
We can't.
We don't smell like dogs.
So we can't correct a dog in a dog way. And so when we try and correct them in a human way, it gets lost in translation a lot. The easiest way is when you can identify signs of stress, when you know what stress looks like in your dog, and sometimes they can be really subtle, you can then go, that is making my dog stressed.
Next time on the Dog Podcast.
Because it's something I think a lot of people should be aware of. In your book that I thought was really important was the concept of the extinction burst.
Yeah.
I noticed the Jack Russell Terrier.
Got a hammering?
Got a bit of a hammering. Is that not some form of manipulation though? So
we're forced to wear clothes.
It'd be a very different interview.
Be a very different interview.